You're watching UATV News. My name is Ina Kosinska. Good evening. The first batch of coronavirus vaccine has already arrived to Ukraine. A plane from India delivered 500,000 doses of the Covishield drug, which is produced under the Oxford-AstraZeneca license. It was registered for emergency use in Ukraine the day before. Starting in March, Ukrainians will be able to sign up for vaccinations at a family doctor's through the call center of the Ministry of Health or on a special COVID-19 website. First of all, people from risk groups will be vaccinated. Then the invitations will be sent further.
When, according to the vaccination roadmap, the appropriate stage starts, citizens enlisted in the electronic queue will be offered to register at the vaccination point by selecting the appropriate one, as well as date and time of the visit. We have all the internal processes ready. We train workers of contact centers. Everything will be organized at the most decent level in our country.
Earlier, the Covishield vaccine was approved by the World Health Organization. Permission for its use was given by Great Britain, the European Union and India. The delivery of the Pfizer-BioNTech vaccine under the COVAX initiative is delayed. The drug will be delivered to Ukraine only in March. A batch of 117,000 doses is expected. In addition, in March, Ukraine will also receive the Chinese CoronaVac, and in July, the delivery of the American Novavax is expected. Ukraine's defense ministry has again reported death of Ukrainian military in Donbas. The tragedy occurred as a result of shelling of an observation post. They note in the ministry that attacks by illegal armed formations have become more frequent recently. Details in the following report.
Ukraine has already informed the OSCE about losses in Donbas. The Ministry of Defense says the escalation began right after Ukraine's Security and Defense Council imposed sanctions against certain individuals for financing terrorism. Shelling of our positions, peaceful settlements, both in our territory and in uncontrolled territories, usually begin when the trilateral contact group starts its meetings, while the recent shelling began after the National Security and Defense Council's decision on sanctions. Subversive groups are also operating in the rear. A spy who was passing information to the occupation administration of the Donetsk region was seized in Kharkiv city. The man was recruited during his last trip to Russia, the Security Service of Ukraine informs. He was collecting information about the Oplot type of tank. All facts of violations of the Minsk agreements, the use of illegal weapons or provocative actions are documented. The Office of the President of Ukraine is preparing a new program for the return of the uncontrolled part of Donbas and the occupied Crimea. They promise to present it in the nearest future. The President has a plan on how to deal with this situation. We are working upon the issues of Crimea and Donbas. There are many different issues as well, not just negotiations. Those are social problems being resolved by phone. Today is the 212th day of the comprehensive ceasefire in Donbas. The Ukrainian side complies with it, they stress in Joint Forces Operation Headquarters. They also believe that if the silence regime is cancelled, it is likely to lead to an increase in the number of attacks and deaths. Reported by Nick Starkov, Ina Mazurkevich, Artem Holub, UATV News.
Germany will provide 10 million euros for restoration of Donbas. The program will cover more than 500,000 residents of the territories in Ukrainian Luhansk and Donetsk regions controlled by Kyiv. It goes about financing of the social and infrastructure project already being implemented in 12 territorial communities. The money will be directed to the development of inclusive education to ensure access to clean water and to support youth. Ukraine lowered the VAT rate on agricultural products. The law was signed by President Volodymyr Zelensky. Producers of grain, sugar beets, sunflower seeds and other oil crops will have VAT reduced to 14%. The President's office says this will increase the competitiveness of agriculture and attract investment. They poisoned themselves with pills. They fell out of windows, they cut veins. More than a dozen Ukrainian teenagers have attempted to commit suicide since the beginning of the year only. More than 100 attempts are recorded annually. Very often the victims are from 14 to 17 years old. Why do teens decide to take their own lives? What signs parents and teachers should pay attention to in order to prevent a tragedy? Our journalists have studied the situation and prepared a report.
A 14-year-old girl cut her veins right at school in Vinnytsia region. A 15-year-old schoolgirl fell from the 16th floor in Kyiv. Another teenager stepped out of the window on the 14th floor. In the city of Uman, 2 schoolgirls overdosed the pills. 2 more girls from Kyiv region poisoned themselves with antispasmodic drugs. All this happened just a week ago. Experts say that dangerous games in the social media could be the cause. Children watch lots of videos on social networks and decide to experience something similar. Very often children don't even realize the danger. For instance, the kid is challenged to try 40 pills of a medicine and see what happens next. An adult has critical thinking and understands that it is probably the thing to avoid. Children don't understand they're experimenting. Children want to prove that they are brave to assert and fulfill themselves. After a 10-year-old Italian girl who took part in a dangerous challenge died, one of the social networks was blocked in the country. A number of similar groups manipulating the kids have become more active in Ukraine, the law enforcement say. Any new task might contain a certain precondition, for example, do not talk with your parents during the day or hide so that the parents cannot find you for a certain period of time. We also noted there could be tasks to inflict a sort of damage to one's body or hide in some dangerous place. Inna usually explains her kid the danger of some websites. She's the mother of a 14-year-old teenager. The parents talked to the daughter and all agreed to install an antivirus on gadgets with a parental control function. The access to the unwanted sites is immediately blocked.
We have allowed our daughter to use some social networks, but we also have a kind of an unspoken agreement. That is, we have access and passwords. Yet we don't read her personal messages, but we can check if some strange and incomprehensible messages from strangers appear. Then we decide if it's bad, then let's block it.
Psychologists say it's useless to ban mobile phones, limit access to the internet and arrange total control. Children look for support outside if they lack it in the family. The main cause of tragic accidents among teenagers and young kids is not the internet. Unanswered love, bad relationships with parents, domestic violence. It is not an outside expert who should talk about problems with children, but a close person whom a child trusts.
The most important emotional contact for a child is you. Even if a kid resists, shouts at you to go away, he or she still understands that you devote time to your child. If a child is filled with positive emotions from his parents, suicide will never happen.
To prevent tragic accidents, the national hotline for kids was launched in Ukraine, as well as a chatbot in Telegram and Viber called Kyberpass or Cyberdog. Their children, parents and teachers can learn how to act in case of cyberbullying or any violence in schools or in the streets. Experts also advise to be frank with kids and concern oneself with their problems. Besides, provide them help and engage them with interesting activities like a theater, sports school or programming courses. This will give a good psychotherapeutic effect. Reported by Nick Starkov, Svetlana Sich, UATV News.
Radio-controlled car racing. The Ukrainian championship gathered 80 participants in Odessa. Most of the designers made their cars by hand, and they paid attention to not only external similarity, but also to driving performance of cars as well.
Самодельная машина. Это уже призер был Украины.
Andriy has assembled a mini racing car along with his son. They are both masters of sports in radio-controlled rallies. They came to the competition in Odessa from Pokrovsk of Donetsk region.
Вообще занимался картингом.
I was engaged in karting, and when I left this sport, I didn't have enough adrenaline. And here there is enough adrenaline and competition. I won 3 times. My son won more. Participants from all over Ukraine came to the championship. All were divided by experience, age and level of models. Everyone has 5 minutes to check in.
Уникальность сегодняшнего мероприятия.
The uniqueness of this event is that it is the first indoor competition of radio-controlled models in Odessa for a very long period, more than 30 years. Here, like in any sport, a candidate master of sports is awarded. There is also the Ukrainian championship, the European and World Championships. Kyiv resident Volodymyr is a 10-time champion at international competitions. He was fond of radio-controlled cars since childhood and now works in a car dealership. You can buy everything, but the way you assemble it is a separate skill, separate culture. The work may be rough, the wires could be connected differently. You can make one car great, but your recipe is not likely to help the same way to others. Besides, everyone has his own driving style. All participants compete for sports interests. There are no prizes here. The winner is the one with the most points. Reported by Nick Starkov, Anna Gorodentsova, UATV News.
Ukraine helped to deliver 4 tons of cargo to the International Space Station. This was done using the ANTARES launch vehicle. Its first stage was designed in Ukraine. In addition to food and scientific equipment, a patch was delivered to the ISS, with which they will try to temporarily seal a crack in the Russian segment of the station. At present, 5 spacecraft are connected to the ISS.
Now that Cygnus has reached the 200...
On to for Cygnus, we do see...
And the snares have closed, and we have confirmation.
That's all for this hour. More updates on our official website, YouTube, Twitter and Facebook pages. Thank you for watching. Goodbye.